back during that last big Nintendo Direct, the one with the Smash reveal, one of the biggest surprises to me was all of the Nintendo 3DS games they dropped on us during that presentation. Going in, I expected they'd be talking about Detective Pikachu and maybe a couple other little games, but they had quite a bit of stuff, including Luigi's Mansion, which, man, I wish that was coming to the Switch. And among all of these games was Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey, which is set for release in 2019. My God. And during this financial briefing that took place last week, Nintendo stated that support is planned for this system through 2019 and beyond. So it's beginning to look like the 3DS will live longer than all of us, probably, at this point. There's just no sign of Nintendo dropping support for this thing, which has become a pretty big debate in the Nintendo community. Some would prefer Nintendo stop supporting the 3DS altogether, just totally drop it, and delegate all of those resources to the Switch. On the other hand, the 3DS has a massive install base, and that's going to be hard to cut the cord with. This is tough, something I've gone back and forth with in terms of how Nintendo handles it. I think we can all agree the Switch is the future for Nintendo, and while the 3DS may have the big install base, the games don't sell as well as sales would imply. They do sell, but it has over 70 million units, which is about 4 times the hardware sales the Switch currently has, but it's not like games are selling 4 times as much currently or anything like that. So being real, there are tons of people who probably own multiple of these systems at this point, but many of them have moved on for the most part, and are probably primarily playing on other systems. But there is still money to be made here, though, don't get me wrong. I just think a lot of people have this a bit misconstrued in their heads. They see there's 70 plus million people playing their 3DS hardcore. No, it's not the case. And that's why, like I've said, I think it's great what they're doing with games like Sushi Striker and Captain Toad, in that they're being released on both the Switch and the 3DS. Can't go wrong with decisions like that, right? Put the game on both platforms. If doing it's not going to hold back the Switch version, and you feel like you can make some profit off putting it on the 3DS as well, why not? Go nuts. Most of these other titles that we know are coming to the 3DS, like WarioWare, Bowser's Inside Story, I get it. They make more sense on the 3DS. A game like Bowser's Inside Story would probably be more difficult to port to the Switch because of the game using the dual screens on the DS. And since we're talking about these games, let's be honest, while the system is still getting, quote, support, it's not like they're going hard with it at all anymore. Yes, there's still more coming for it than I had expected, but the games are mostly pretty simple, will also be on the Switch, or are ports of past games. So I don't see what they are doing as taking too much attention away from the development of major new games on the Switch. So to those of you overly concerned about the 3DS taking games from the Switch going forward, I wouldn't worry too much. There doesn't appear to be anything blockbuster level coming to the system, at least in the near future, and I don't see them ever putting more emphasis on the 3DS. They may still be putting some emphasis on it, but it's only going to decrease going forward. Still though, I can't help but get annoyed by the absence of something like Luigi's Mansion on Nintendo Switch. The original Luigi's Mansion was obviously on the GameCube, so I don't see why this couldn't have been one of those titles that was available on both the 3DS and on the Switch in some HD form. Hell, Captain Toad actually had to use the Wii U gamepad, and that's going to be on the Switch. And that's not the case with Luigi's Mansion. And if they are going to continue the series, have a Luigi's Mansion 3, for instance, the smart place to put it will be on the Switch. And I know there always will be the 3DS fanatics who will freak out at any suggestion of the support getting pulled for the system. Like with what I just said, I'm sure there will be someone in the comments who's like, no, Luigi's Mansion is a 3DS franchise now. No, sorry, nothing is a, quote, 3DS franchise anymore. Okay, core Pokemon is coming over to the Switch. Once something like that happens, everything is fair game. Again, when it comes to major releases, the Switch is going to be the place to be. In that financial report, Nintendo detailed that there's over 1,000 games currently available for the 3DS. So for you hardcore 3DS players, I'm sure there are some on there you haven't played yet. And I'm not suggesting that they should totally kill the system. Like I said, support it where it makes sense, where you can do it on the cheap, as they're doing. I don't see a problem with that. So how long will they support this thing, really? At this point, it's almost impossible to tell, and it really depends on how much support you need to consider a system still supported. If one game every once in a while means support to you, then it could be for a long time. I think if they can, again, keep finding things they can put on both systems and feel like it will be profitable, they should totally do it. But I think once we get some of these upcoming big games on the Switch, like Smash Brothers and Pokemon, hardware sales are really going to start taking off. I think many are still waiting for the first entry in a lot of these fan favorite franchise, which is why I think the hardware bumps for Smash and Pokemon are going to be massive. Most people would probably agree, but I think it's going to be even bigger than a lot of people think. I really do believe there's like an insane amount of people waiting for that first Pokemon game to drop, especially if they do a cool Pokemon bundle, with some nice decals and stuff on the Switch. I think even though people are expecting big sales from it, expecting it to move a huge amount of hardware, it's still going to surprise people. And as the Switch install base grows, it's going to keep pulling away from the 3DS in terms of software sales, which is going to result in it making less and less business sense to keep making games for the 3DS. That's just the way it is. However, the 3DS does need to be commended. It has been the system that just won't die. I mean, remember the launch of this thing? It seemed like it might be DOA. Things were not good for this system in the early days, and many people felt like it might not last more than just a couple years. But Nintendo pulled a total 180 with it, loaded it up with great software. The 3D gimmick, still to this day, I think is pretty lame. Honestly, the 3D in general didn't exactly take off. And hardware-wise, there is no reason this system should have thwarted the likes of the Vita. But it got the software, an insanely great library of games, and for that reason, I think it will always be a good system to own. Down the line, when a lot of these modern systems are considered retro, the 3DS is going to be one of the easiest ones to recommend people buy. And the support Nintendo got from players on this system helped them limp through the dark days of the Wii U. So even though I've mostly moved on from the 3DS, and the future is with the Switch, it's going to be nice to see the system still getting some games. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on the continued support of the 3DS, quote, through 2019 and beyond. How long do you think this thing is going to live for? As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.